Hello, everybody. My name is Elizabeth, and I am a librarian at AADL. I'm here today with some book recommendations to help celebrate Native American Heritage Month. Today, I'm focusing on fiction titles. I also have recommendations for nonfiction titles. And I'd like to start with a book I recently read. This is Sabrina and Corina. This is a National Book Award finalist that I actually hadn't heard of previously. It's by Callie Fajardo-Anstine. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that exactly right. I hadn't heard of it previously, but actually I'm going to look and see when it was published because I'm curious. 2019. So I didn't hear of it right when it came out, despite it being a National Book Award finalist. I'm not sure how I missed it. But I picked it up a few months ago, and I'm so glad I did. This is a book of short stories that focuses on Latina Indigenous women and girls. And it's a pretty quick read, but it just grips you. Every single story is so powerful. And just kind of the intro says, a powerful meditation on friendship, mothers and daughters, and the deep-rooted truths of our homelands. This is set against the backdrop of Denver, Colorado, and the surrounding areas. So really a powerful American Western setting too. And the women in these stories just navigate incredible traumas and hardships, and also incredible love and beautiful relationships and traditions with such grace and such caution and such kind of quiet force. It's really amazing. Some of the stories are challenging to read. It deals with the often unreported violence against Indigenous women that happens in this country. But also there are just some wonderful moments, again, between mothers and daughters, between siblings, between cousins, and the family ties that are so important in many Indigenous cultures are really come through in the stories in this beautiful book. I also just love the cover art. It's amazing. So this is wonderful. Sabrina and Corina, short stories. Very accessible. If you want to pick something up and maybe read a few stories, you don't have to read the whole thing. Although they all take place in the same general spot, they're not connected. So you could read two, you could read the whole thing. I think once you start, you'll probably want to read the whole thing, but a wonderful recommendation. Next, I wanted to move to a book that you may have heard of. This is There by Tommy Orange. It definitely got a lot of press when it was published, which was a couple years ago now. This might be 2019 as well, 2018. And this is an amazing book. I'm just reading, I'm looking at the back here, and some of the reviews are a miraculous achievement, urgent, invigorating, absolutely vitable, a gripping deep dive into urban Indigenous community in California. And that is why I wanted to recommend this book in particular, because it really focuses on urban Indigenous people. And a lot of fiction that I read focuses on more rural Native communities, especially people maybe living on reservations, which is, of course, important and interesting to read about. But I do think sometimes urban Indigenous folks get left out of fictional stories, and that is not the case for There. This is a multi-generational story. It actually focuses on 12 different characters. They're all making their way to the same powwow, the big Oakland powwow. And it's just talks about all of the different things that Indigenous people have had to suffer through in this country: violence, recovery, identity, preservation of culture, loss of tradition, loss of family. And it's beautiful. It's devastating. But it's told from different perspectives of, like I said, 12 different people. And I think that it is a must read. I can't recommend it enough. I don't want to say too much because I don't like spoiling, especially fiction. But this is There, Tommy Orange, the story of 12 different urban Indigenous people traveling to the same powwow and just bringing all of their different and shared history with them. The next book I do not have a physical copy of. There were too many holds on it at the library, but I have read it, and we can put up an image of the cover so that you can see it. And that is The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. This was recently a finalist for our 2022 Washtenaw Read. It was not selected as the winner, but it is absolutely worth reading. Diane Wilson is Dakota, and I have some notes here, so I might be glancing down. And The Seed Keeper is the story of multiple generations of a Dakota family struggling to preserve their way of life, particularly the women in the family. And it starts out with a girl named Rosalie Ironwing who lives with her father, and her father, they're both Dakota. Her father teaches her Dakota traditions, teaches her about the stars, the woods, survival. And one day he does not return from checking his traps. And so Rosalie is considered an orphan, and she's sent to live with a family a few towns away, which is fine, but she misses her dad in her hometown. And so then years later, she returns to her childhood home. She's been recently widowed. She's now a mother, and she wants to she's searching for her family, for her community, for a place that she can belong. And that's where we have a range of Dakota women's voices enter the story, her ancestors. Rosalie had married a white man and had taken a lot of comfort and solace in tending the garden on their farm. And the story kind of follows a bunch of Dakota women throughout history and emphasizes the contrast of how Indigenous people use land and how colonizers use land, and how Western civilization farms versus how Indigenous people may farm. And so as Dakota tribes were forced away from their land, the women took with them seeds. And so these seeds kind of allow over the generations people to share a collective memory and share a kind of this connective thread that makes its way up to Rosalie today. And a lot of issues are dealt with in the book. The sending of Indigenous children to boarding schools, the removal of tribes from their native lands, tons of things that are tough to read about, but also that the women in the story just handle with such grace and such strength. And it's really beautiful to see how they and the seeds connect their way back up to the present day and to Rosalie. So definitely recommend that, The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. And lastly, I wanted to share a book I read last year, Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford. And this is, Kelly Jo Ford is a Cherokee. She's part of the Cherokee Nation. And this is also about 4 different generations of different Cherokee women. And it starts out in 1974 in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. And there's a 15-year-old girl who's pregnant, and her mother and grandmother are super disappointed, but she indeed has the baby. And, it follows Justine, the mother, and her daughter Rainey over the next 30, 40 years as they try to search out a better life, but also try to preserve some of the traditions that Justine was raised with, and just how they look for a sense of home and how that's a struggle for them to find. They feel a connection to their native tribal lands in Oklahoma, but there's sometimes a better life for them in Texas with the oil boom. And it's just, it's a really wonderful book. It's maybe slightly less focused, I would say, than some of the other ones on like specific kind Indigenous traditions or Cherokee traditions, but just kind of a portrait of what it means for some to be a modern day Indigenous person, and how the history has affected perspectives, and how people have been forced to give up certain traditions, and how that has caused this sort of dichotomy and some trauma in the minds of people as they have lived in several different spaces, traditional spaces and Western spaces and all that. And it was really good. I loved it. The descriptions of the land and landscape were very beautiful and really transported me to Oklahoma and Texas and those areas. And I really felt like I could see what the women in the book were describing they were seeing. So I would recommend it, Crooked Hallelujah, Kelly Jo Ford. And of course, there are so many wonderful, wonderful books written by Indigenous authors about Indigenous and Native American, American Indian people. And so I would encourage you to seek out more. And if you've read a really good one, please feel free to share it in the comments. I always want to read more. And I hope that you are reading some books by Indigenous authors in celebration of Native American Heritage Month. And maybe some of the ones I recommended today will give you some ideas for what to put on your reading list next. Thank you for listening.